am Rachel from 7 in All, and today, for today's video, it's going to be a special one because I'm going to be doing a Q&A with my mom, homeschool veteran of nearly 30 years at this point, mother of 8 children, and you guys gave us a lot of questions. We are going to try to get through as many of them as we reasonably can without going too crazy long, but I do expect this to be a longer video, so sit back, play this while you're washing dishes or whatever. Take your time. We'll be here for a little while. So that's my introduction. You've been homeschooling a long time. You're actually starting to get pretty close to the home stretch.
Yeah,
home stretch. A lot of the children have graduated and moved on past homeschool life. But you've not left it behind because you are staunchly a homeschool grandma who still stays involved in the everyday with phonics and adding and subtracting and all of that. So let's start back at the beginning. Everyone wants to know, what made you decide to start homeschooling in the first place? It was the 90s. There was no Instagram showing like you should homeschool.
Yeah. It might be an unconventional reason, and there were several different components, but the major reason was I wanted to be with my children. So I noticed that once kids left home, let's say they're 4 or 5 years old and they go off to preschool or kindergarten, you basically don't see them all day. And I wanted that. I wanted to be with them. And I also was very greedy I want to teach you how to hold a pencil. I want to teach you how to hold the scissors. I want to teach you how to count. I want to teach you how to read. I want that. I want
those experiences.
I didn't want to give that away to somebody else. I wanted it. So there was other considerations, but I think that was the biggest draw.
Okay. What age did you start formal academics, and were there any battles with starting out in homeschooling?
She was the first, and we went to our first homeschooling conference to look for materials when she was 3. So I would say that was the beginning of formal education. Of course, before that, we had done many different reading books and singing songs and crafts and things like that. But as far as actually going and buying our first curriculum and starting out, she was 3, and then the rest of them, we all formally started around 3 years old. But I think education-wise, it starts way, way before 3.
And yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about that term formal academics because it can mean different things to different people. For us, we tend to see the start of formal learning is when you're like, this is just going to be a part of our lives now. We're going to have daily little routines where we sit down and we read books. It's not something that's, maybe happens here and there, but we're going to be consistent with, we're going to sit down, we're going to work on this, we're going to sing some songs, do some flashcards, play some games. And to us, it's really the consistency and the building the expectation and the habit of learning.
And you also have a skill in mind. It might be
like a purpose.
Can they jump off the floor? Like it could be anything, but you have a goal in mind. Like, what's the skill that we're going for?
Mm-hmm. So in Charlotte Mason homeschooling, there's a whole different view of what formal education is, and that's when you start requiring exams or you start requiring narrations. So that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about when you start having a more organized approach to learning. Kids are learning from birth, but when you start to organize it and give yourself a system and a habit to just work on consistently. And yeah, that started around 3, and you continued that for pretty much all your kids. And then I have also used the approach of around 3 years old is when we start having a more consistent routine with learning. And I actually think that starting young really reduces any battles about starting schoolwork because they can't remember life before school. This is just a habit. Sitting down and learning with mom is a habit. It's not a punishment. It's not something only big kids have to do. It's just part of their lives for as long as they can remember, and it's not a bad thing. It's one of the quality times portions of our day, a lot of times mom is busy and cooking and, mopping floors and everything, but here's a time when she's going to sit down and play with me and sing with me and all that. So it's quality time. It's not a bad thing. If you could go back in time, all those decades, is there anything that you wish you could do differently?
That's such a frightening question, and I'm so glad I could not go back in time. It was a good time. It was a fabulous time. It was an exhausting time. And so I'm glad I can't. Probably I would have tried a little more on the foreign language. That really wasn't a big push in our homeschool. And seeing how my children have actually turned out, it's like, oh, that would have been a good idea to push it more than we did. And art was not involved at all. And then I have an artist child, so there were some, like, in retrospect, what would we have been more intentional about, I think would have been more in the art side and foreign language.
But also you could see that as kind of evidence that kids who have giftings and passions and interests, in some ways it doesn't matter what you do in your homeschool. They are going to find those.
They'll find it.
They will find it and they will pursue it. Like when those truly inborn passions and gifts and callings, they find it anyway. So don't feel like you have too much power as a homeschool parent that if you don't teach it to them, they'll never learn it. And how did you balance your children's interests in activities outside the home, especially because you had so many children?
I didn't balance. Nope. And I didn't try to balance when a child had an outside interest. For the most part, they also had to be creative enough to make it happen. So if they wanted an outside activity, many times it's like, well, can you find a ride there? Can you find a ride back? Can you find a way to pay for it? Some of those things were the challenges set before them, and a lot of them said yes, of course. Figuring out problems is cool, and they were able to do it. So I'm thinking of music or participation in plays or participation in, they did participate in a lot of outside
Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts, a lot of outside activities, but I would say I was not a big part of their participation. In fact, I was probably, I don't know, maybe
slightly hindered it at times.
Yeah, go ahead. What's it? Make bricks without straw and see if you can. And they were like, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, and that very much aligns with my memory as well. It's like just the realities of life, especially once we were living overseas. We had a lot of kids. You had babies you were taking care of at the same time as teenagers. So you've got these teenagers that we have a lot of big ideas and things we want to do. I did theater throughout high school, but I got myself to my practices. I got myself to my competitions. We found ways to make it happen, but we didn't have to be like, oh, mom is our taxi driver, or mom is our program coordinator of these are all the activities that we have to shuttle all these different kids to.
Another thing is they came up with big ideas even for celebrations that I would not have been able to pull off. Like, I want a costume 16th birthday party, and it's like, that's a great idea.
You can do that.
You can do that.
So she more mobilizes. Or we had end of year school parties that we would invite our friends to, and we would have a bonfire on the beach, and we would just do that. So there was a lot of taking initiative on our part because you had a lot on your plate and you didn't necessarily have the space, or you also didn't need to.
I didn't need to, and I think that's a good thing to actually know is your children hopefully are very capable. My children were very capable, and I think if I would have thrown a costume party, it would have been a bad party because I have no gifting in creativity, really.
Party planning.
And no desire. So it's like, let the people who are gifted and have the desire and the drive to push things through, yay, go.
And I really feel like moms don't need to feel like it's their responsibility to be entertainment directors for their children.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you keep the focus on relationship when you have a child who loves to push boundaries? And we have a whole interview video, which I can link below, with a child who liked to push boundaries. Who is now grown up, doing absolutely fantastic. You guys have a great relationship, but how do you value that relationship in
This is a
the midst of challenge?
really difficult question, and I would say there's a continuum of children. So there's children who push boundaries, and then there's children who push boundaries. So not all uncooperative children are in the same category. So I think one helpful way to look at it is set the standard. So a standard might be, we wear shoes when we leave the house, and some children put on their shoes, and some children fight you to the death to put on your shoes. My job as a mom is to set the standard and then bring the child to that standard. So
And they choose the easiness at which they cooperate with that standard.
So sometimes you can be a really nice mom, yay, put on your shoes, good job. And sometimes you can be the really mean mom, like, okay,
Guess we don't get to go.
We don't get to go because you didn't put your shoes on, or you don't get to have snack because you didn't put your shoes on. But I want to put in a caveat here with the kids that are on more the super push boundaries. That's on them. And as a mom, you might feel very anger, frustration, resentment, many different feelings with the kids that are just making days miserable with their lack of cooperation in the simplest thing. They can't put their seatbelt on, they can't put their shoes on, they won't finish their math, etc., etc., etc. And you do this all day long. In those type of situations, I would caution that you have to bring consequences into their lives, but I would caution you to keep the consequences within your control. Because once you give an uncooperative child a consequence that's in their control, it turns out badly. So let me give you an example. A consequence might be, okay, if you don't finish your math paper, you don't get snack. That's within your control. You can withhold the snack. But if you say, you don't get to eat until you finish that math paper, that's in their control. They will go on hunger strikes for forever, and you've lost the peace in your home, and you want to, oh, do I have to go back on that? They've skipped lunch, they've skipped dinner, so keep the consequences with those super uncooperative children in your control, so you can say, okay, no, what I really meant was one snack time. I didn't want to turn this into a hunger strike, or just know that there are children who want, that's just part of who they are. I will die.
I'll die before I'll give in.
I'll die before I give in. And you really don't want to get in a power struggle with them. So try to keep, hold your ground, keep the boundaries, but do it on your terms, and don't turn those terms over to them.
And how did you decide what needed to be taught and when?
I don't remember deciding that. I think I basically followed the curriculum.
Just rolled with the curriculum.
Whatever they said the next thing was to teach, then I taught it, and then when the curriculum finished, I started the next one. You ate them for breakfast, so
I went through a lot.
We went through a lot of curriculums very, very quickly, and then just went on to the next thing.
Yeah, we have a more traditional approach to school, so we're not like over stressing about, okay, what history cycle should we be doing? Should we do a 3-year or 4-year history cycle, or should we do a unit study on this type of science? We just had kind of a more traditional approach, and we also tended to be a little bit more advanced, starting whenever a child could at whatever level.
Yeah.
But
going as fast as however they could.
Going as fast as they could, and we leaned toward being advanced, which to me ended up giving them, like, to me, that approach seems to leave you feeling a little bit more relaxed in a sense and a little bit less anxious. Like last year, my sister who's in high school took 6 months off of school while they were traveling in the US. And we have absolutely zero worries about that, her taking a 6-month break from school, because even back then, she would have been well more prepared than most college freshmen would be for starting college, and she still has her whole senior year ahead of her. So the fact of being very academically prepared, working a little bit ahead, does give you the peace to take off time when if you need it, or when the opportunity allows. So I kind of like that side effect. What do you do when you as a teacher want to provide a feast of education to your children, but it feels like they more want a fast food education? You want to teach them a lot, but they are like, okay, give me the basics. I want to be out of here. I want to put as little effort in as I can.
I'm the cook in my kitchen, and I'm the teacher of my classroom. So I don't let my kids necessarily pick what I cook in the kitchen until I turn the kitchen over, and then they cook. And I don't let them pick what I teach in the classroom. So they might not like it, but they still have to endure what I decided I wanted to teach them, what I decided I wanted them to know. So if I like feasts, I cook feasts, and then they have to endure the feast. It might be that they would have preferred French fries, but I didn't give them French fries. So I decided what I gave them, and they were the victims of my choices.
But also the level of mastery, like that your children ultimately determine the level at which they master the material. You can provide the feast, and some of them will pick a few bites and nibble here and there and get a slight thing. Others of them are going to clean their whole plate and ask for more. That's going to be dependent on them, the level of which they engage with it.
But I wanted to be proud of what I offered. And so definitely we had kids that gobbled more than I could even prepare. But then there were those that, this isn't all that interesting, but I was the teacher, and I wanted to know that I was providing them.
You knew it was worthwhile to learn, even if they
didn't.
even if they didn't, in their childish foolishness. And then this is very appropriate for my season of life right now. What are your tips for homeschooling when pregnant, and or when you have a newborn in the house? You had a lot of kids.
So pregnancy for me was very difficult, and I was very sick, and it really affected energy levels and what I could do. So on a practical side, I tried to get as much work done on days I could actually get work done. So I cooked meals for the family for months and put them in the freezer.
Good old-fashioned freezer meals.
Good old-fashioned freezer meals. Good old-fashioned, like, when you got a good day, get everything done you possibly could. Like, and when you go shopping, make sure you don't have to go to the store every week, or make sure you just get things done. Be very efficient with the energy when I could do it. So I would say pregnancy was the most impactful time during our homeschooling. Actually, after a baby was born and I was healthy, it was not nearly as impactful as illness. And adding a new child to the mix, it's like, oh, they're just in the same room, and when they get bigger and can actually move, then like they have a little play fence, and they're just with us. The baby's just a part of everything we're doing. And that was kind of fun, because I remember, I think it was Anna, one time holding a book upside down, and I think she was 2, very young, and she just starts spouting this memory passage that an older kid was learning, and I look over at her and so
And we often enjoyed that stage, because maybe there would be times of, oh, okay, can someone play with the baby while mom's working with a different kid, and every kid, of course, wants that job of getting off of school to go play with the baby. So there was a lot of that. You also did a very good job with equipping us from a young age to help and to be useful and to be skilled. Sometimes our skills outpaced our common sense at times. But we were problem solvers.
Yes. Can't guarantee the solution, but
we would find a way. So we were very well equipped to do, jump into things that needed to be done with our own schoolwork or with household tasks, with taking care of toddlers and babies as well. So it was a group project.
Yeah.
Next question kind of fast forwards to today in your own season of life. What is life like after the school years, after graduation, especially as far as relationships are concerned?
It is so fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch the adventures these guys get into. It's a lot of fun to watch their careers develop. It's a lot of fun to see their families getting built. It's just a joy.
Yes, and some of us, like me, have actually decided to move back after moving very far away, move back and continue to find ways to do life close to the homeschool center, even though I've been out of the house a long time. And how did you handle sibling fights?
Okay.
A lot of kids, a lot of big personalities.
Yeah, a lot of big personalities. But we were dead on sibling fighting. So it was just like, no, this is not going to happen. So we had some very clear boundaries with how family members treat each other, which is absolutely no violence, no hitting, no nothing, no pushing, no physical fighting. As far as the verbal arguments, if somebody was arguing when they're quite little, like they're arguing with a toy, I want to play with it, I want to play with it, no, it's my turn, that kind of stuff, the toy was in the trash instantly. It was like, nope, we treat each other preciously, and we are not going to do this fighting over stuff or my turn or this kind of thing. Another thing, when something good happened to a sibling, we taught the other siblings to rejoice. You rejoice with those who rejoice. And if something sad happened to a sibling, then you mourn. You mourn with those who mourn. So teaching the strategies. So what do you do when your brother wins the game? You say, yay, good job, glad you won. In these situations where there's a lot of comparison going on, you teach your children that jealousy is not okay. Envy is not okay. The wrong kind of competition in a family unit is not okay. We are in this together, and your siblings are your best friends. And so to value those relationships very highly is what we were striving for.
Yes, that's what I remember. Not allowed and explicit teaching of these values, and siblings are great for building all those relationship skills, which you will need to take those skills into all future relationships. Skills of not being envious and jealous of other people, of rejoicing for other people and not fighting all the time. So what do you do when your child doesn't want to learn and doesn't take their schoolwork seriously?
Well, you can do the best you can to provide them the opportunity to learn, but really they're the ones who control the decision if they actually participate. You can bring consequences into their life to help them mature in this journey, but also as a mom, you might need to let go a little bit with, I really wanted and desired and think you need to put better effort into this, but I don't actually control the effort you put into something. I do control many things in your life, and maybe I can encourage you to put into some more effort, but ultimately that's on them.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, odds are that you probably know some adults who are like, man, I wish I would have taken my education more seriously when I was growing up. I wish I would have put more effort into it. but they just did not have the maturity or the value for it when they were young. And so they find out later on in adulthood, and they maybe do start pursuing education in a later season of life, and they find out it's actually way harder to do it as an adult when you have so many other responsibilities. But yeah, ultimately your child's relationship with their education is theirs. It belongs to them. It's not something that's really in your control. Of course, as parents, we want them to choose good, see education for the gift and the beautiful thing that it is. But they won't always do that.
Yeah.
How do you handle rudeness, especially your mom, your teacher? And it can feel
Really
hard.
bad. So, consequences. One, I like to label things and help the child label it. So, give that comment you just said a label. Give that body language, which you're showing me, give it a label. I want you to label it. So quite often if you say, oh, you're being rude to me, I'm not rude, I wasn't being rude. Don't argue with them. Make them give it a label. When it comes out of their mouth, oh, I'm treating you really rude right now, or they're like, I don't know what this is. Really? Well, if you saw it in somebody else, could you figure it out? Because I think you could. When you make them label their own actions, it's like, okay, and maybe they'll come up with a term like rude or something and say, okay, and why? Why is rude your go-to choice? I want you to explain that to me. So make them explain their decision making. You get a lot of eye rolls, especially in the teenage years. you can, but and bring consequences into their lives. Like, I have boundaries. I don't allow people to treat me rudely. So maybe you have to go to your room right now because I need to feel safe. I need to feel safe in my home that the people I'm with will not treat me rudely and I'm not a victim. So you may go somewhere else for a while, and when you think you have the self-control to treat people as they should be treated, maybe you can come back.
And each family should make and also communicate your own standards for speech in your house. And that will vary from family to family. To me, respectful speech is a very, very high value, and it's a very high worldview. Respectful speech inside the family and outside the family. That's a very high worldview for me to communicate to my kids and to make a standard. It's like there are ways that we talk and there are ways that we don't talk, and to hold that value from a very early age. And they will push it, and they'll experiment with, hey, can I say this rude thing? No, that's not going to lead to good results.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on the push or the trend or the movement in homeschooling to just not do any worksheets, throw away the worksheets, and focus on play-based learning? And the questioner mentioned especially due to the concern about hand development.
I love worksheets. I love them. They are so fun.
Especially good worksheets.
Good worksheets.
Good worksheets, we're talking about.
Clever worksheets that are
Creative worksheets.
they have a learning purpose, and they're well designed, and
Age appropriate.
they are just the best. And I'm just so thankful to the people who created some wonderful worksheets. And I would like to say that worksheets and play are not like day or night. Like
You can only have one.
You can only be in the daytime, or you could only be in the nighttime. Like you can't have both. You can play and do worksheets in the same day, and it's fine. I would say this is an artificial dichotomy that's going around, and hands. How do hands develop? Hands develop by being used. So you can do this, and you can do this, and it doesn't actually, I would say it doesn't actually hurt your hands, especially, and you can dig with a shovel, and you can push a broom, and you can pick up things. There's no magic like I picked up a toy versus I picked up a rock or I picked up a pencil. Picking up things is picking up things, and I think this making certain things evil it doesn't help the poor mom who's like, I've got to teach my kids something, but using an obviously easy
tool,
effective,
cheap
method is going to make my child a cripple. I was like, no, it's not. Okay, sorry.
They'll be fine. I think building motor skills is incredibly important. It is a passion of mine. I am the mom who is having my little kids do real work for me since they can walk. I've had my kids in the kitchen using peelers on vegetables at 2 years old, and using butter knives, safe butter knives, to cut cucumbers and bananas and whatever thing I'm making, and stir the pots while I'm very carefully talking to them about the dangers of heat. I am the mom that's having my kids work, hold the broom, hold the vacuum, sweep, doing all these things very early on. And I also have done worksheets. My oldest son has thrived with worksheets very much. I actually find he masters things very quickly when he has the chance to write things down. And if you listen to these blanket statements, he's a 5-year-old boy. According to these blanket statements and trends, I shouldn't even be letting him write. But he taught himself to write the entire alphabet before he was 4 years old, and he has fantastic handwriting. He's learning cursive. He writes all the time. Both of my sons have very, very good motor skills for their age. They can hold pencils, they can draw, color, everything. Paint. I encourage that, and I don't think that that's something at all to be afraid of, or that, different kids will develop at different times. And my sister, who is very, very tiny for her age, she did have a slower time to master the hand control and the hand strength, just because she was so tiny. So her brain was actually way ahead of where her body was. Yeah. That can happen, but address that and work to deal with that when it happens versus just worrying.
If you have exceptionally small children, which we did, her growing, she didn't grow as a baby, and her hands were very, very small. So then you'd have to deal with that specific issue.
So deal with issues when they're real and they're in front of you, versus just these alarmist things of, if you give your children a worksheet, you'll hurt their hands and steal their joy of learning for life. The drama. Now, for the large homeschool families out there, of which we definitely qualified as one, what are your best strategies for juggling multiple kids?
My best strategy is make kids part of the strategy. And what I mean by that is just make them aware of what needs to happen in the day, and then make them aware that they can contribute to what needs to happen. I did not do chore charts. I did not do big assignments. I did not try to make things fair. I tried to tell them, you have eyes, you know what needs to happen, you figure out a way to make it happen. And I think they thrived with that autonomy. It's like, Mom's not bossing me morning, noon, and night. She just said, hey, walk through your house with that. Walk through the house with your eyes open, and then figure out a way to be useful to whatever that is. And they did very well with that.
Yeah, I also don't lean toward the approach of, here's your checklist of everything you need to do, but more of creating the worldview that you can do stuff, and there's stuff that needs to be done, and building that worldview, encouraging that worldview as kids grow in maturity, and then being like, hey, you know what? You have the skills, you have the ability, you could do something about the mess or whatever it is.
For example, when my kids started cooking, and I trained them how to cook, taught them how to cook, but then it's like when I'm turning it over, it's like, okay, dinner's gonna be on you. I'm not going to tell you
what to cook.
I'm not going to tell you how much to cook. I'm not going to tell you this is what Dad likes and this is what this other person likes. You've been around for a while. You've figured that out. If you want the whole family complaining because you made something they all hate.
You made something just you like and no one else likes, which they did do sometimes.
That's on you. And you grow to understand, you made way too much of this, or there wasn't enough food for everybody. Like, life teaches you, And I think they were also proud of themselves when everybody was like, oh, this is so good, yay. So I think making them a part of the solution, but not deciding don't micromanage them. Give them the vision, give them the direction, give them the skills, and then say go.
I think micromanaging is really what puts a lot of mental burden on a lot of moms.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to let things go a little bit.
But you can let them go when your kids are actually skilled.
When you've taught the skills.
When they can actually do it. So yeah.
Now, academically, what was your ultimate goal that you wanted to see your children accomplish?
Okay, so academically, I did want my kids to go to college. I'm not going to hide that. I know sometimes that's really in the homeschooling community. It's like, I had girls, and I want them to go to college. And so far, out of 8 kids, 5 have graduated. 1 is in her senior year of college, and then 2 have yet to start. So for the most part, it's happening. One of the reasons, I don't think college is the cure to everything, but I think it opens a lot of doors. Especially it opens doors if you want to have a career overseas. And so I wanted them to have opportunity to pursue their dreams. And so yeah, I was going for hopefully college.
And I will say, I would not say that our family was like a hyperly financial success focused family. Faith is really the core of our lives. Service is the core of our lives. Loving our neighbor, loving our community. So it wasn't, we always strove to do well academically, but it wasn't really with this purpose of, oh, I want to have a high-powered career and I want to make a ton of money. I mean, I love academics. I wanted to do well academically. I did extremely well academically. And I had the goal of being a mom and a writer and having a whole lot of fun. And you can be smart while doing that, whatever you're called to. You can be well educated without having to have this goal of like, I want to make $1 million.
Or I never want to have a family.
Education does not steal a love of home and family and kids and community outreach and service and just loving the people that God gave you. So they can coexist.
It's like worksheets in play.
It's like worksheets in play.
They're okay.
And how do you set educational goals align with where a student is at versus where their school grade is?
Okay, I think as a teaching philosophy, you always start where a child is at. You start with what they know, and you're moving towards what they don't know. So you're not teaching a curriculum, you're teaching a child. So you teach from where the student's at and take them to where they need to go.
Yeah, so we've volunteered with special needs learners for a very long time. So this means, maybe a child is 5th grade in age. You don't just break out the 5th grade books just because they're there. Maybe they actually need 1st grade level math. Maybe they need 1st grade level reading. And that's not like, this is terrible. That's just like, this is what you know. This is what you know, and we can use this tool at this level to work on helping you build your skills to the next.
Right, and you can, once you start with what they know, it doesn't necessarily take a year to get to the next grade. It's like, and we'll go as fast as we can. It may take 2 years. That might be as fast as we can, but it also might take 3 months. So, especially if you're dealing with an older child who, for some reason, is behind. So just being flexible with, okay, where are they at and where do we need to go? And using the tools that will get there and in the most efficient manner.
Also, we like to talk about consistency, especially when you're dealing with special needs, especially when you're dealing with students who are behind and they do need to work to get to goals, but also with any normal student. Consistency is going to be one of your most powerful tools in your homeschool toolbox. Not, we're going to do this really amazing school day today, and then I'm exhausted and burned out, so we're not going to do school for the next 3 days. Not doing that, but planning a homeschool that is consistently happening, doing phonics every day for a short amount of time is going to be so much more effective than doing phonics once a week or Spanish once a week or whatever. Yeah.
Consistency, and also, especially with your special needs, them, when they know what's expected of them, so not a lot of transitions. A lot of times, like flipping from curriculum to curriculum, oh, this learning game to this learning game, this activity to this activity, actually just keep with something for a good long time, and usually that yields some pretty significant results.
Yeah, remember that as an adult and as a teacher, you are actually probably going to get bored with what you're doing way faster than a child will, especially when you have different learning needs, special needs. They are actually probably going to need a lot more repetition of the same activity to really build mastery, or repetition and getting used to the same curriculum. And you can lose a lot of progress when you're constantly making changes just to keep yourself entertained. Okay, have you ever taught an ADHD child, someone who won't sit still, can't sit still for more than a couple of minutes, can't focus and learn from a read aloud?
Yeah. So I would say one good approach is worksheets. Read-alouds I super love them. They're very effective, but I would not take an ADHD child and try to read across 5 Aprils to teach about the Civil War. I'd say, there was a Civil War. Here's the 5 things you need to know about it on this handy-dandy worksheet. It's going to take us like 5 minutes to learn these handy-dandy facts, and then we'll move on.
And we can review that core information tomorrow very easily.
And so for certain learners, you need to take a very focused and very intentional approach. I'm not saying that
never do read aloud.
Never do read alouds or make them endure things that are very hard for them to endure. But if you're actually trying to get a certain set of information across that you just want them, you need to know this, they're not going to pick it up out of the air when you're reading this really nice, fantastic, super long story.
Yeah, so doing efficient teaching methods for children who have short attention spans.
Yes, makes sense.
Make your lessons short and effective. Focus on what you need to do. We've really liked Math UC for one of those reasons, actually, because there's no fluff. Okay, and how do you help children who find learning more difficult, who have learning disabilities? What are just some of your top tips or strategies in that area?
Okay, number one, learning difficulties vary a lot. So learn as much as you can about your child's learning difficulties so that you are coming from an informed position into their education as their teacher. Also, take the extra time and effort that they need. So there are just some jobs that take more time, it takes more effort. Just be okay with that. Okay, that takes a lot more time, it takes a lot more effort than other people, but you're teaching your kid. It doesn't really matter how much time and effort it takes another mom to teach her kid. So be okay. Just come to terms with the fact this is going to take a lot of energy, it's going to take a lot of time. One of the ways to get those times is work through the summer. Okay, that's a lot of weeks. There's another reason to work through the summer is that you lose momentum. So a lot of what is needed in these situations is consistency. And you basically lose everything over a summer, and then you're starting over, and then your own discouragement factor is like, so are we ever going to make progress? So sometimes even working on weekends. Sometimes you can, it depends on the child, but you can lose in 2 days. So doing maybe partial schedules on Saturday and Sunday just to reinforce what it is that we're trying to achieve. Not making a lot of transitions with, I want to try this. This isn't working because I worked on it a month. I want to try this month, and then I want to try this other thing. Transitions really, really slow down progress, and I would think about it a long time before I'd actually make one. Like, make sure you have a really, really good reason for making the transition. Another thing is don't have it working at a level that's actually too hard for them. that doesn't actually make them progress. So start at where they are and then bring them through the skill building process to where they need to go.
Whatever the age recommendation or the grade level says on the book.
Doesn't matter. And then also, if you can get help, like some people can't, and all right, that could be your situation. If you can get help, get it. I'm not talking professional help. Get professional help if you need it, but a lot of time help comes in the form of a grandma or an older aunt or an older sibling who will not lose their mind doing the repeated activities that are necessary, or the repeated games, or the repeated, I read this story, I'm going to read it again, and then we're going to read it again, and then we're going to read it again. So some of that mind-numbing repetition that is just necessary, it's just part of the job. See if there's someone that you can pass that off to, who can do it with enthusiasm, who can do it with just that, this is so cool. I love singing the alphabet again. Like some variety, and sometimes just being able to even take a little bit, like who will do those multiplication flashcards? Because I can't do it one more time. Finding that one person who's like, that's fine, I can do that. And be very specific with your help. Like, don't just throw the child at them, but no, work on this and work on it in this way so that they're coming from an informed standpoint.
Yeah, and what you said about time, I think, is very, very important, because I've seen so many homeschool moms become very discouraged because you can always see those graphics on the internet, on Instagram, saying, you know, how much time should you spend on homeschooling at these ages or grade levels? And it's usually like 1 to 2 hours for a significant part of the homeschool life. And they're like, what am I doing wrong? Because we cannot get done with our homeschool in 1 to 2 hours. Realistically, a lot of people cannot get done with homeschool in 1 to 2 hours. Some people can. Some kids work like lightning. Some kids learn like lightning. And other kids don't. They need more time. And that's not, we don't need to see that as a bad thing, as a waste of time, that it takes so long to learn. Sometimes it just takes long to learn, but learning is something still worth doing. It's worth investing the time into. It's worth putting the work into. So really, I don't think that those time guidelines are necessarily the most helpful thing out there, because so much depends on your goals, on your situation, on your kids. Some kids, like even if you're just talking about non-cooperative ones, will take longer than 1 to 2 hours, because they'll spend 1 to 2 hours doodling in the margins of their schoolwork instead of actually doing it. So yeah, don't take those time recommendations too closely to heart, and just take the time that schooling needs. It's not a waste of time. It's a worthy investment of time, and it's not something that we need to try to put only the minimum into. Right, I think that's the last question we'll get to for today. I hope that this was helpful and encouraging in some sense. Feel free to chat with me down in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer comments. And thank you so much for being willing to come on the channel once in a while. And I will be seeing you next time. Bye.
Bye.